Hi, thank you so much for coming up to talk with me. I really appreciate you being open about your concerns. I know a lot of people hear very conflicting things about ABA, and those concerns are completely understandable. So I'm actually really glad you asked because it gives me a chance to explain what ABA really looks like today and what my role actually is. So, to start from the beginning, radical behaviorism is the philosophy behind applied behavior analysis. That might sound very technical, but the idea is actually very simple. We try to understand why people do the things they do by looking at their environment, their routines, and what outcomes matter to them. It doesn't just mean ignoring thoughts or feelings, it just means that instead of guessing what someone might be thinking, we try to look at what we can actually observe and measure, which allows us to make changes that are practical and helpful in real life. I want to highlight that the goal is never to control someone or make them behave a certain way. Our goal is to identify meaningful skills that the person wants or needs in order to live a more comfortable, independent, and fulfilling life. Modern ABA is built on a very strong ethical foundation. Everything we do is individualized, consent-based, and supervised by a board-certified behavior analyst. As an RBT myself, I follow a very strict ethics code that focuses on protecting client dignity, supporting autonomy, and overall just making sure interventions are always safe, respectful, and centered on the person's well-being. Now, I completely hear your concern about ABA being abusive or being only used for dog training. I do want to highlight that these worries are actually very common, and they usually come from two places. One, overall misunderstandings about the philosophy, also just stories about older, outdated practices that are not reflective of what is being done today. I think it's very important to validate that those concerns come from real experiences. I know that there's some adults out there with autism that have spoken out about practices that they felt were harmful, and I do want to reiterate that their voices matter. Their feedback has shaped the field and helped us grow into a more trauma-informed, collaborative, and respectful practice. Radical behaviorism, when practiced correctly, actually emphasizes understanding the individual. It teaches us that all behavior has a purpose. People just don't do things just because. There's always a reason, and it's our job to understand that reason, not to judge it, punish it, or ignore it. ABA is used in so many human-centered fields like education, mental health, communication support, daily living skills, community independence, parent coaching, and even workplace performance and organizational psychology. It's much more broader than what many people think. And regarding the idea that ABA is just dog training, yes, while both ABA and animal training use learning principles, the similarity ends there. Human ABA is rooted in dignity, choice, collaboration, and most of all, personal values. We don't force behaviors, we don't demand compliance for the sake of compliance. Everything is tailored to that person's goals and comfort level, which is a huge difference between the two. If it does help, I want to share something personal. My little brother actually has autism, and he's a huge part of why I chose this field. Growing up, I really watched him struggle with things like communicating what he needed, especially handling changes in routine. Our family never wanted to change who he was. We love his personality exactly as it was, and that's the most important thing to me in my job. But we did want to help him feel more safer, more understood, more connected. The ABA support we received wasn't about correcting him, it wasn't about making him act a certain way. It was always about learning how to communicate with him in ways that actually made sense to him. It helped us understand what he enjoyed, what overwhelmed him, and what he needed when he was struggling. For example, we learned how to support him during transitions, how to recognize when things were becoming too loud or too bright, and how to teach him new skills without pressure or frustration. Everything was based on his pace and his interests. Seeing how ABA helped our family and understand him better, how it reduced stress, increased communication, and it helped him feel more comfortable was honestly life-changing. And that's why it's really important to me to show people what compassionate modern ABA truly looks like. I'll give you a real life example of what ABA looks like today in a community setting, because I think that's the best way to understand it and see it in action. For example, let's say a child has a really hard time going to the grocery store because it's overwhelming. There's bright lights, noises, crowds, so it becomes a really stressful experience for the whole family. The family may want to go together, but they don't want their child to feel scared or pressured to go. We might start by asking, what does the child enjoy? What specifically makes the store overwhelming? What makes them feel safe? What does the family want to achieve in a realistic, supportive way? So we go about this by making a plan that's gentle, gradual, and personalized. Maybe we start with just a 2-minute visit to a small, calm store. Maybe the child brings a favorite toy, has noise-canceling headphones, or listens to a calming song. If the child shows that they're comfortable, we slowly increase the time. If they show signs of being overwhelmed, we stop and reassess. Nothing is ever forced, nothing is ever rushed. The focus in this is building confidence, safety, and meaningful participation, not on making the child behave a certain way. And I want to emphasize that that is modern ABA. I just want to close by saying I truly understand why people have questions and concerns about ABA. There have been harmful practices in the past, and it's important that we acknowledge that instead of dismissing it. But I also want to see what ABA can look like when it is done ethically, compassionately, and collaboratively. The ABA that I focuses on autonomy, comfort, communication, and meaningful growth. It focuses on supporting people, children and adults, in ways that respect who they are and what they want for their lives. So I really appreciate you starting this conversation with me. It shows that you really care about people's well-being, and I do admire that. As an RBT, I think someone, especially me with a little brother with autism, I'm very committed to making sure that the work I do is always respectful, empowering, and ethical. If you have any more questions or want to talk more about what ABA actually looks like, I'm always happy to chat. And thank you again for taking the time to ask.